Welcome back to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I'm your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, my guest went in and out of consciousness and experienced a reality outside of her current during her near-death experience. Joining me today, ladies and gentlemen, is near-death experiencer Lisa Everhart. Lisa, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely no problem at all. My pleasure. Now, Lisa, I want to start off this interview with the religious question, as I do very often with my guests. Prior to having your near death experience, was there any particular religious belief system or practice you held before having your near death experience?
Yes, so I was raised in a Christian home. Growing up, my parents had Bible study every Wednesday. I went to Christian school. I was raised up in a very religious household. So yes, Christianity was my base of faith.
Okay, and with that said, let's go into actually what it was that caused your near death experience to occur. I understand the subject matter is very serious.
Yes. So leading up to my NDE, I went through a series of events that really unfolded depression within me, alcoholism. My body was physically ill. My liver was failing. I was in and out of the hospital with kidney issues, and I had put on a severe amount of weight through the depression itself. I never really left my house. I didn't really have any more friends. Everything had just basically was just destroyed through my thinking. And I took my own life. I took several pills, poison, all kinds of things to make sure that it was a done deal. And this is actually what caused my near death experience. I took the pills about seven in between 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning. I knew that my boyfriend at the time was going to be absent because he worked on Sundays, and I knew he wouldn't be home from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. at night. So I took them as soon as he left the house. And the first thing that I could remember after taking the pills was that I was outside of my body. And I remember being above my body, and it took a few moments for me to really process that I was no longer in it. And when it really hit me that I was no longer in my body, I had recollection of what it was that I did. And I knew that it was me laying there on the bed. From that point forward, I remember being carried out in a body bag. And that is all I remember from that point forward. I do know that I went to a very dark space, but there was absolutely nothing around me. And for how long I was there, I do not know. And the rest of the sequence of events that I experienced, because time is different in the 3D versus where I was, where everything all happens at once. So the sequence of events, I am still left unsure what took place when it took place, but I do remember exactly what it is I saw and experienced with vivid detail. It's very real. So from that point forward of being in the dark space, I remember waking up in the hospital and them asking me, Lisa, do you know why you're here? They're asking me my name, my birthday, all the series of event questions that you ask when someone's coming to you in the hospital. And I was only briefly aware of my surroundings as I looked around, and then I fell under. And from that point forward, I remember waking up or exiting my body once again. And there were these monitors. There was a big one and a little one, and there were codes coming down them. And I did not understand the coding. And at that point, I wasn't even trying to figure out what it was. I just felt compelled to leave where I was at and to move forward. And as I was moving forward, I became aware that I was not in my body, for I was going through walls. I was going outside this glass window where there were two trees. And these two trees I tried going up one of them. I could not go up it. And so I went over to the one to my left and I tried going up this one. And this one, it transformed as I went up it into a tree house of some sort. And as I was inside of it, this TV, this old-fashioned TV appeared, and there was static going down the screen. And from that point, I woke up in the hospital again. And they were asking me the same questions, and I could hear everyone in the background saying, "She's seizing, there's no activity on the monitor." And I could hear all the chaoticness going on in the room. And then I fell back under. And when I fell back under this time, I went out the opposite side of the building where I was at, because it was no longer a hospital room, but this brick room. And it was just red brick all around. And there was hallways. It was a really big building. I still don't know where this is or what it was, but I went out the front door and I went back around to where it's all green and these two trees are. And I went back up that tree. And this time when I went up it, there was the same television, but all these different scenes and I knew it was me. I knew that every single one of them was me. Some looked like me as I look now, some didn't, but I still knew that it was all me. And I could see my eyes make contact where there was a scene where I was laying in my bed, and then there was a scene next to it where I was in the hospital and I was awake. And as I leaned forward and put my force forward, I turned into like a vortex almost of like these bright colors, and I was sucked in to that screen, that little hospital bed viewing. And as I woke up again in the hospital, I for the first time could feel my senses, where I could feel that there was tubes in my mouth and in my nose and IVs in my arms. And then I fell back under. And this time when I fell back under, I remember waking up and there's dirt coming off of me. And as I'm watching this dirt fly off of me, and I could see pieces of skull all around where I am. And as I lean forward with my force, because I don't have a body, I'm actually like just light. I can't see my hands, I can't see feet or body of any sort. So as I move forward, I see three crosses. There's one to my right, one to my left, and one directly in front of me. And so I raise up out of this dirt and I continue going over to my right. And there's this rock, and this rock turns into a cave. And as it's transforming into this cave, and steps begin to appear, and I keep going down and down and down. And I look around me, and where it was all dark before, there's mirrors everywhere, but they're shattered mirrors. And as I'm looking around, I catch a glimpse of the reflection. And at this point, I did not know that it was me. I thought that it was another being outside of me and that I was looking at it. But then I realized that what I'm looking at, which was a serpent, a fiery serpent, I'm looking and I'm realizing that the reflection is me. And so from this point of coming to my realization that this is me, I morph, and there's this black tar that just consumes the light orb that I am. And I transform into just this goo, this black tar. I don't know what it is other than sticky black gooiness. And then all of a sudden in front of me, if I had a body, it would be like I was holding, but it was floating in front of me, this child in an incubator. And from that moment, I woke back up and I was in the hospital room again. And the last thing that I do remember after going back under is a man in all white, and he didn't look exactly like human, like how we look. He was like illuminated, beautiful, beautiful, these green eyes that are just piercing, this long, flowy gold hair, goldish brown, and it was very curly. And he had this purple tie around his waist, like a sash of some sort or like a belt. And it was just a vivid purple. And from that moment, as I seen this being, I become one with it as we shoot up. And at this point, I could see a body when I first saw this being. But then when we became one, my body, I could no longer see my body. We became a vortex and we shot up out of the ceiling, out of the room. And as we flew up, I could feel the speed. I could actually feel it with my senses. And it was very, very fast. I felt the clouds on my face. I felt the moisture and the coldness and the breeze of the wind of shooting up into the atmosphere. And as we came into space, we broke out and I could see Earth underneath me. And then we went even further and we shot straight into the sun. And as we entered, I could feel the warmth and the heat before entering. And as we did enter, we went up into these little mountaintops where it is there, everything is just bright, emerald, gold, silver, granite, all of these beautiful stones. And there's water flowing underneath all these mountaintops. And so we go to the very top one, right in the center. And as we entered in there, there's these two children. They were sitting side by side and they were very tuned in through their eyes. And they're looking at these screens. And what was playing on one was playing on the other, and vice versa. And I knew in that moment that their mind was creating what it was being shown. And that is all I could take away from what it is I saw there. But what I heard, because you don't speak there, everything's telepathic, everything you're hearing it within your mind. I heard you are a messenger. And then from that moment, I was just overwhelmed with the most loving feeling that, I mean, we could ever desire here on this earth. It just surpasses it extremely. And it just consumed me. And I just felt pure bliss and joy and happiness and peace and contentment. And then from that moment, I felt a jolt and I woke up again. And I was just wondering what everything that just happened, what was that? And it wasn't until much later that I actually have started to understand what it is I experienced. But that is my near-death experience and everything that I saw.
And that is quite an experience. As I said at the top of the show, experiences, because it sounds like you had several near-death experiences in a single day, it seems like.
Yes.
I want to go backwards and ask a few follow-up questions. Going back to your suicide, you said you had this out-of-body experience. You said that you had taken the drugs early in that day, or about 7,
Mhm.
8 a.m. How were you found? Who found you? Was it your boyfriend that came back? And how long do you think it was that he returned to the home?
Going off of what he told me that he didn't get home till about 7:45, 8 o'clock. He found me. I was unconscious. He said that he panicked and was just very, just in a panic mode, very upset. And he called 911 and he said that they did carry me out in a sheet and that he didn't hear anything from anyone at the hospital until 24 hours later. But they did call my mother, who was my content for emergencies, and they did not call her until about 24 hours later as well, saying she finally came to. And my mom was oblivious to what anything had happened. She's like, "What do you mean came to?" And so, but it was 24 hours before my boyfriend or my mother heard anything from the hospital.
Carrying you out in a sheet sounds as if they found you clinically dead already, at least. So, would you have a time of how long you would have been clinically dead if you could pull one
I
off the
just
top of your
know
head?
I just know from the time that I took the pills, from the time that I was found, was close to 12 hours unattended.
Very, very fascinating. And then you say when you get to the hospital, you come to, and as they're asking you questions, you go back out again. And this is the first of several times that you go back out. You talk about the hospital seeming to shift its scenery. Did it change the scenery when you came out of your body that first time?
Yes, so the first time that I woke up, I could see. very blurry that I was in a hospital room. It was just everything was white, and I'm very familiar with what a hospital looks like from all my stays. So I could identify that it was a hospital, but the moment that I fell under, every single time that I went under, it was a brick wall, a brick building with these dim yellow lights and these hallways. And it was when I went outside, it was always big and green with two trees.
And then you said while you were outside, your body floated literally through some glass windows or glass doors, and you made it out into what appeared to be like a field with two trees. And you talk about a television screen, an old television screen, like one of those old box TV sets, and there was just wiggly lines on it, almost as if when you get, like a white screen or something to that effect. But then you remember waking up and then going back under again and back into this field. And this time, when you floated out into the scene, you were able to see on the screen, I guess, what many near death experiencers would call your life review. Now, in these lives, you said you saw yourself as you were and you saw yourself as other people or someone else, although you still knew it was you. Do you believe that these were perhaps past lives?
I do believe this strongly, and I believe that the two scenes that I saw right next to each other was an actual shift from one reality into a next reality. Um, and I believe this because of my prior events that took place after my near-death experience.
And then you woke up again, and the third time you went back out once more. You fell unconscious, and this time you had dirt coming off of you. You were rising up. You saw three crosses. It was as if you were in a cemetery, would you say?
Yes.
And that's very interesting because some time ago I interviewed a near-death experiencer who also committed suicide, who said that they woke up in a cemetery-like environment and was warned, was given a dire warning. This could be the end if you continue this particular path. So it ultimately ended up becoming a message for that near-death experiencer. Um, Ultimately, you shift into a cave and you appear to see what looks like shattered mirrors and a reflection of a fiery serpent, as you said. And you believe that this reflection was you and wasn't separate. You weren't separate from the serpent. You believe the reflection was a reflection of you as the serpent for some
I
reason.
I do believe this because everything around me was mirrors, and the only reflection that was within the cave was the serpent.
You also said something very interesting. You said that when you looked at your spiritual body, you were a light orb yourself, which is also very common in many near-death experiences. When people say they go out of their body, when they're able to see their body, they see a light orb. They don't see hands, legs, or anything of that nature. But you began to have black tar kind of fall off of you or somehow pour over you. And ultimately, that's what your light orb became. You do recall, though, at some point seeing an illuminated man, you said, who was beautiful. And my question to you is, did this entity appear ancient to you?
Yes, but didn't look old. So I guess old comes when I think ancient, but most beautiful and very youthful looking, and just the prettiest image that anyone could view.
Well, I say ancient just because of the apparel you said he was wearing. You said he had a
Yes.
sash around his waist, long hair. Um, Ultimately, you take off and become one with this entity and you ascend upwards, way out of space, into the sun, into a mountain. Would you say on this mountain there it was like an ethereal city almost in
Yeah.
itself?
Yes, there was many mountaintops, and there was life and trees and rivers, and everything was just illuminated with brightness of color. Just no color here compares to it. It's just real color there, and it's beautiful.
And there you saw two children watching a screen, but in some way, shape, or form, they were creating what was on the screen. Now, did you get an idea exactly what it was they were creating?
No, I don't believe that that was part of the message that was supposed to be given to me. I think that the only thing that I was meant to take from that image that I saw was that our minds were creating what it is we're experiencing. And so that is what I took from it. And that is actually the message that I have been able to apply in my life.
Did you tell anyone about these experiences at any given time when you finally woke up and did not go back under?
I did tell a nurse on duty, and she was very lovely woman, and she listened. But shortly after, the psychiatrist came in and was just wanting to hear the story, and they were writing notes. I don't know what was written. But I did stay in the hospital for about 3 days, and then after I did go through um, a, like where they watch you for a few days because I had committed suicide. So obviously they were watching me for that reason, and also because of my physical body issues as well.
Now, some may say, well, this sounds like perhaps she went to the hospital and they pumped her with a bunch of drugs and it sounds almost hallucinatory. However, prior to you even going into the hospital, you had an out of body experience while you were laid out on that bed. So I think that kind of, puts that kind of theory to rest. Now, if I were to ask you, how real does this experience feel to you versus you sitting in that chair right now, what would you say? Because I know you said as you were going upward in an ascended form with this individual, this illuminated man, you could physically feel wind. You can physically feel heat out in space where you were. How real did this feel to you?
It feels more real than anything I've ever experienced in this life. I mean, it was like I was seeing for the first time. It was like I was feeling for the first time. There's just, I don't even know how to really explain it, but it was very real. Um, it was very real.
You also talked about feeling this immeasurable love and compassion and warmth, something many near-death experiencers feel. That's not something you've ever felt before here, has it?
Definitely not. I've dreamed of it. I've looked for it in relationships, with parents, with loved ones, boyfriends, but nothing comes close to the love that I felt in that moment. I mean, not even love for how I love my children. It's just, there's earthly love, and then there was this, and it's just, it surpasses it all.
And that's very common, a common statement that many near-death experiencers also come back with when they're in this light, usually. They feel this, immense love, immeasurable love. Near-death experiencers also talk about coming back with what's called after effects. They may have a lack of fear of death. They may have higher empathy levels. They may have some precognition, premonitions, etc. Did you come back with anything different about you after having your near-death experience?
So when I returned, um, I still had all my same problems. I continued on with everything. Everything remained the same at first, but I knew that what I had experienced was something profound, and I wasn't going to take that for granted. So I wrote it everything down that I experienced, and every day I would go back and I would read it, and I came to the conclusion that it was the message of, you're creating your reality with your mind. And that is what I took from my experience, and that I could, with God's love that was now within me and was activated, and I knew that I was loved and that I was one with them. And I took that power that was given to me by that experience, and I have applied it in my life. I started writing myself love notes. I started saying affirmations. I started praying. I started viewing other people differently. I let go of resentment, of anger. I decided to really evaluate why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And it led me back to what I was thinking. and I took responsibility. And once I took responsibility, I could make the changes that needed to be made change, that needed to be changed within me. And I applied it consistently. And it was hard for coming back from that. I had PTSD. I was experiencing vivid dreams of where I was to where I am now. And it was a very rocky path, but I didn't give up and I kept going. And I have changed. I've stepped into a new story. Within 3 months, my liver was restored. Within 4 months, my kidneys were healed. Within a year and a half, my weight just vanished off of me. My relationships have been restored. I wake up happy. I wake up thankful. I wake up thankful to be thankful. And I'm truly a new person, and I don't take life for granted anymore. And I wake up every morning just truly filled with gratitude that from something so broken and horrible, God even used that situation to bring life out of it. And by all costs, I'm not saying encouraging that you have to go through a near death experience or you have to take your own life. I believe that my message is you don't have to do that in order to receive God's love. God's right there within you, calling you, always calling you. We just have to listen, and we need to take responsibility for the thoughts that we're thinking. And with faith and with God and with a correction of our thoughts, anything is possible.
Sounds like you did receive a lesson from that ultimately changed your earthly life. And as I spoke about earlier, about that other near-death experiencer who attempted on her life, she also received a very similar and more of a dire warning. But nonetheless, you both got a lesson that life is worth living and that there is a purpose and a meaning for your being here. You talked about God and God's love. I want to piggyback now to the first question I asked you about religion. You said you grew up in a Christian household, virtually grew up as a Christian. What does religion and Christianity, I suppose, look like to you now after having your near-death experience?
Well, before I was looking at it as something outside of me, that God, that my relationship is something separate, that we're separate. And I believe that's where a lot of my chaotic path took place, is because I was separating myself from God's love. So now I still call myself a Christian. I still believe in the scriptures. I just believe it in a first person. I believe that God is in me and I am in God, and that we are not anything separate from each other. And with this new understanding that was given to me through this experience, I believe that's how I've been able to change my life, is because I'm not doing it alone, separate from God anymore. I'm doing it with God, and God is living through me as me, and I am in God. So when you stop separating yourself from God, you get to enjoy life, you get to live life, you get to love people, you get to know that when you are giving yourself self-love, you're loving God because God exists within you.
And that's a very profound and great answer, I think, because it also not only uh, matches what many near-death experiencers talk about when they talk about the oneness that they feel when they have their near-death experience. One major characteristic of a near-death experience actually is this being united with everything, being united with God, as you say, being united with other spirits, being united with everything that exists. And I think you can feel the fullness of that once you know that you are not separated from it, which is something a lot of, I think, institutional religions kind of pride themselves on being separate, from God. But in reality, it's the complete opposite, as what you just said. If you know that you're one with God, you know that love is within you and not somewhere far off that you have to, pray and beg for it. It's always there for you.
Yes, yes, definitely is. It's a game changer.
Yeah, as I can see. Well, Lisa, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us that absolutely fascinating account.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
No problem at all. Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa Everhart.